Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Very warm welcome to webinar on ethics in the digital age by our PK Vijayakumar sir, IRS retired. Let us start our meeting with a silent prayer. Once again, warm welcome all of you to webinar of Thrissur Management Association organized by Student Chapter. Now may I request Student Chapter Coordinator CA Shaji PG for the proceedings.
Good evening, everyone. I think this is the fourth webinar Student Chapter is conducting. Today, our faculty is PK Vijayakumar sir, IRS retired. President, beloved President, CA Sony CL. Secretary Sijo. Treasurer CA Manoj. Management Committee members of TMA. Members of TMA. Members of various other management associations. College staff. Students of Students Chapter. And other guests from various parts of the country and abroad. Welcome you once again to this webinar on business ethics in digital era by our eminent speaker, Sri PK Vijayakumar IRS retired. I think we can go straight away to the seminar with an introduction. Sony? Or you want? Hello?
Yeah, after your introduction, we can straight away go to the program.
Okay.
Okay.
Before that, you can tell something, Sony. I invite our President TMA CL Sony to briefly say something about this seminar and the speaker. Okay. After that, I will go for the introduction.
Thank you, Shaji PJ. First of all, let me greet everyone the wishes of Onam celebrations. Every year we used to conduct Onam celebration in a befitting manner. This time due to the COVID and relating restrictions, we are not in a position to conduct the celebrations. I wish all of you very happy Onam. Today, we are going to hear such an eminent personality, none other than our PK Vijayakumar sir, IRS, on a topic, ethics for the digital age. Every manager is concerned, the ethics is a very big issue. My request all participants kindly mute your sound. Kindly mute the sound. So this ethics is very important, whether it is in the marketing or sales or wherever area, we are confronted with the issue of ethics. Sometimes we may say nothing said about this in legal terms, but ethics is beyond that. Ethics starts where the law ends. I think it is a clear demarcation. Whenever we end with the law, the ethics start from onwards. I'm not taking too much of the time because we have such an eminent personality to discuss on this topic. Today we had a final day of the faculty development program. Last 5 days we had an extensive faculty development program on case studies and discussions in collaboration with the Case Research Society of India. And today we were fortunate to have the address of Professor N. Devichandran, former director of IIM Indore. And we are planning more of such programs in the future also. I'm not laying in between Vijay Kumar sir and you. I straight away handing over to CA PJ Shaji for the introduction. Thank you, PJ Shaji.
Yes, Sony.
Yes.
Sri P.K. Vijay Kumar is well known to every one of us in Trichy. He was a officer of 1978 IRS batch. He is a postgraduate in chemistry from St. Thomas College, Trichy, and he is a B.Ed degree holder in first rank from Calicut University. He retired as a Director General of Income Tax Investigation from Cochin on 30/9/2011. His post is, for your information, his post is equivalent to Additional Secretary to Government of India. He worked as a Commissioner of Income Tax in 3 metropolitan cities, Mumbai, Kolkata, and Mumbai. He worked for Income Tax for 33 years and held very many posts in the states of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, and Mumbai. As Commissioner of Income Tax in Mumbai, during 2008 to 2011, he was in charge of the highest tax-paying companies of the country, like State Bank of India, Tata Group of Companies, L&T, HDFC, ICICI Bank, Mahindra, Raymond, etc. He has undergone many training programs on personal and financial management in India and abroad. After retirement also, he went on with this work, and he was appointed as an insurance ombudsman at Kochi with a jurisdiction over Kerala and Lakshadweep in 2014. This ombudsman post is equivalent to the rank of Secretary to Government of India. He received the Certificate of Excellence from Governing Body of Insurance Council in All India Conference of Insurance Ombudsman held in New Delhi in 2015. He also functioned as an observer of Election Commission of India during 4 Lok Sabha elections and 3 Assembly elections across the country during a period of 1994 to 2004. He was appointed as an individual external monitor, equivalent to the director post of the Central Vigilance Commission, CVC, to Cochin Shipyard Limited in 2017, Visakhapatnam in 2018, FACT Udyogmandal in 2019. He is a guest faculty in Calicut University for MBA students for subjects like corporate tax, business ethics, organizational development, UK taxation, and healthcare and insurance. Now he is a chairman of Alert Academy of Trichy, imparting training to civil service aspirants and for preparing them for the competitive examinations. He was very recently, he was appointed as a director of Dhanlakshmi Bank in Thrissur on 17th August 2020. He is a patron of Thrissur Kathakali Club. He lives in Pungundam with family. This is a very short introduction of a very eminent faculty and personality well known in Thrissur and in Kerala. With these few words, I introduce and welcome our speaker, Ayas, to this webinar. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Shaji, for the nice introduction, and thank you, Mr. Soni, other distinguished members of TMA, students, and other guests. That said, I wish all the audience, all the persons who are seeing this webinar, a very happy and prosperous Onam in spite of the difficult COVID era we are passing through. I'm going to speak on a subject which is not very popular, but everybody needs that. It is ethics for the digital era. So I will divide it into 3 parts. First, I will deal with what is ethics. Second, I will deal with the business ethics. And third will be ethics for digital era. Everybody has heard about the word ethics. It has actually come from a Greek word, as many of our words have originated from other languages. Ethics, English word, ethics is from the Greek word ethikos. It means character and conduct. Character and conduct. It is, ethics is directly related to character and conduct. It is a very abstract concept. It cannot be defined. What is ethics? Define ethics. It's not possible. It is an abstract concept, and it varies from religion to religion, from culture to culture, depends on the state laws, and from time also. See, what is an ethical behavior today need not necessarily be an ethical behavior tomorrow, and it may not have been an ethical behavior in yesteryears. I would also recite one poem from Kumaranachan to elucidate my point. What he says is, Innale chedor abadham logar kinnatta ajaramagam nalatta shastramadagam adil sammadam moolayiga rajan. This is what? That Innale chedor abadham, yesterday it was a mistake. Innale chedor abadham logar kinnatta ajaram. Today it has become a custom. Tomorrow it may be a science, it may be very sacrosanct. So this is the concept of ethics. And it is also the practice of it is closely related with morality, ethics and morality. What is the relation? Morality, when you say morality, it is individualistic. Ethics actually deals with organizations. There should be an ethics for an organization. And the ethics for an organization also varies from one organization to another organization. For example, there are certain organizations where during a prayer, everybody stands up. That is the ethics of that organization. There are certain organizations, including some educational institutions, where prayer is recited, all are expected to sit. There is no disrespect to God or anyone. It is their ethics. It only to emphasize that ethics will vary from one institution to the other, one group to the other. And ethics is almost synonymous to dharma. What is dharma? Everybody knows. Again, very difficult to define what is dharma. And there is mention of dharma in all our ancient scripts, all our ancient books, everywhere it is there. If there is no dharma in this world, there will be social chaos. There will be social chaos. And there, in our ancient scripts, there is a reference to Purushartha. There is a reference to Nishkama Karma in Bhagavad Gita. What is Purushartha? There are four: Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. These are all very important things as connected to ethics. What is Dharma? As I already told you, there are certain principles in life which you should follow closely. There may not be any written books which will elucidate which are the principles, but out of practice, out of the practices that are prevalent in society, you develop these things. Dharma. And the next is Artha. And Artha and Dharma, they are related. What is Artha? Artha only means finance, revenue. Artha means revenue. Then Dharma, Artha, Kama. Kama means longing, desire. There is nothing wrong in desire. There is nothing wrong in Artha also. See, Artha means finance, revenue. Some people always feel that making money is not correct. Some people feel that making money is the ultimate thing. What is the actual fact? It is something in between. So that is a dharma. That is, you can make money. You have to earn money rather than making money. There's a saying that one should not try to make money rather than one should try to earn money. Earn money means in a legalistic and natural manner. Making money has got a bad connotation. You can make money through illegal means, through corruption. I will come to that later. So dharma is necessary. Purushartha means dharma, artha, then kama. Kama means only desire. You can desire to have anything in life, nothing wrong in that. And you can make money through a righteous manner. Dharma is also called righteousness. So in a righteous manner, you can make money, you can have desire. But ultimately, you should also have a period in life where you should retire. Dharmartha, Kama, Moksha. Moksha means salvation, not that you will go to heaven or wherever it is, or hell or whatever. But there is salvation. That means you are making yourself free from your responsibilities. That is what you can equate that with retirement, where after working for a period of 30 years, 35 years, depending on your age, you retire. So these are Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. These have been enunciated in our ancient scripts long back. And I would also mention here about what Artha Shastra speaks about this revenue. Kosho Mulo Danda. Kosho Mulo Danda is one main important word written in the book, in our service motto, Indian Revenue Service. It means Kosho Mulo Danda. It only means revenue is the root of administration. Administration, for administration to sustain, the administration to survive, the most important thing is revenue, money. So money has been given an important role right from the ancient days, and it continues to be so. But it is closely related to ethics. So one should always understand nothing wrong in becoming rich, but it should be earned through just and legal means. And we also know how the billionaires in the world, starting from Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and Warren Buffett, and right up to our own person from Kerala and all, they contribute so much of money for the poor. For their philanthropic activities are well known. So that means their ethical culture. Pardon? Slide 3, please. Next slide.
Yes.
Dharma over. Business ethics.
1 second, sir.
Yeah. So coming to business ethics, what is true for humans is true for business, as organizations are only structures of people. Organizations are always structures of people. So if a person has an ethics, that organization also should have ethics, which only means business should have ethics. But what we find is the ethics in business mostly results in a sort of managerial dilemma. What is a managerial dilemma? This is very, very relevant in this COVID era. What is managerial dilemma? On the one hand, you have to improve your profitability. You should increase your profit. You should earn your income. Then only you can sustain your business. On the other hand, you should also take care of your employees. Their welfare should be taken care of. You have got social responsibilities, but these are mostly conflicting. If you increase your income, if you increase your profit, you can do so by cutting short your expenditure. One of the expenditure is salary and such other things. So if you are going to reduce the salary, there your social responsibilities are suffering. That is why in the COVID era, certain businessmen, especially from Kerala, NRI businessmen, you must have heard what he has declared openly, saying that in spite of only 50% business I am doing, I am giving full salary to my employees. So he has no managerial dilemma, I should say, because managerial dilemma comes when you have shortage of funds and you have more of expenditure. But he has made it very clear that he will take loan from the bank and he will make money in future. So that's a classic case of how a businessman is observing ethics, business ethics in the most difficult time. But it is not possible for everyone. Such a big businessman, such a reputed, having such a great reputation, if they approach bank, money is not a problem. But there are certain businessmen who will find it difficult to get money, especially in this COVID time. So business ethics and managerial dilemma, they go side by side, and you have to draw a Lakshman Rekha where your profitability should be there and where you can go out of the way for improving your welfare of the employees and doing activities of social responsibility. It's a very difficult task on the part of the management. So business ethics have to continue, and business ethics is mostly resulting in a sort of managerial dilemma for the management businessmen. Next slide. Slide 4. No, before that. Next slide. Yeah, business ethics. It deals with, these are the things, right? It should have, there are two types of issues which are affecting business ethics. One, overt issues. The other, covert issues. I'll explain what is overt issues and covert issues. Covert issues are covered up. These are against business ethics, but it is very difficult to detect and eliminate it. What are some of the covert issues? Capital investment. When you do business and you are increasing the capital, in a way, it may be against business ethics. Mergers and acquisitions. When you try to merge with some organization, when you try to acquire with a weaker organization, you are taking over the business of another organizations. Definitely, there will be some things which will be against business ethics, but still it will be difficult to pinpoint whether it is against the business ethics or not. Then there will be aggressive advertisements, which is familiar to most of us. You advertise certain products, giving wrong information, giving wrong indications, as if this is the panacea for all diseases. And especially now, you see medicines for COVID and all. Most of the companies, they do advertisements. There is an ethical issue involved in that. These advertisements are covert issues, which cannot be clearly seen as against ethical principles. They do that, business community, everybody does that. This is one issue about which one has to be cautious about. And then there are overt issues. Overt issues are bribe. Bribe is one thing. Then favoritism, nepotism, sort of aggression, etc. These are all overt issues, which means easy to find out the violation of ethical principles. But these are very common, as everybody knows. But these should be overcome. Overt issues also have to be overcome, and you should proceed with the ethical policies in the business. And an ethical decision should have the following characteristics: right, equitable, good, proper, fair, and just. And all these things, it will be an ideal case. Or an ethical decision should have all the 6 characteristics, but all the 6 to have included in one decision is only an ideal situation. Sometimes what happens, a decision may be right, but it need not be just. A decision may be fair, it need not be equitable. A decision may be good, but it may not be proper. So there are so many things, so many decisions we come across daily in our life also, which may be legally correct, but it may be ethically incorrect. So legality and ethical nature, these are 2 different things. But an ideal ethical decision should have these characteristics. One is right, the other is equitable, good, proper, fair, and just. These are the 6 ingredients for an ethically correct decision. Of course, it is an ideal situation. Everybody should strive to have an ethical policy consisting of these characteristics. And the next is the most important thing about the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi. So he was born in 1869, in the last century, 19th century, even not in the last century before that. And during his days, he has enunciated the principles of ethics. Although business ethics was not very much used as a term during his days. He is the person who first said about customer is the king. Not in so many words. His teachings have been written in many shops where a customer is important. You should actually help the customer. It is for you that the customer is coming, and you are not for the customer. You are for the customer and customer is not for you. Like that, he has mentioned. And he has also enunciated his 4 principles: Ahimsa, Sarvodaya, Satyagraha. All these things, and Sarvodaya, Ahimsa, Satyam, Sarvodaya, and Satyagraha. These things all are very important definitions, you can say, of business ethics. And also he has emphasized on 3 main principles: speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil. And for that, you must have heard about the famous 3 monkey statues, where the monkeys first cover the eyes, monkeys cover the mouth, monkeys cover the ears. You are not supposed to speak anything bad, you are not supposed to hear anything bad, and you are not supposed to see anything bad. Great ethical principles our father of the nation has enunciated. And he has also said there are 7 social sins. And I will just read out, and surely all these sins are committed day in and day out by everybody, including politicians, bureaucrats, businessmen, everybody, all of us, one should say, that we are committing these sins. 7 sins. Look at that. Politics without principle. It is a sin. So a political party or a politician without principle, it is a sin. Wealth without work. So that is why earlier I mentioned, you can earn money, don't make money through unfair means. It is wealth without work. You do your work and you make money. Nothing wrong in that. If you are making wealth without proper job, without any work, it is a sin. It is a social sin. You should understand that. It is a social sin. Then commerce without morality. Commerce means business. You do business, you make profit, but you are not observing the morality. You are not observing the it's actually sin. It is a social sin. Then knowledge without character. See how it has been defined. You may be a knowledgeable person. You know everything. You are very efficient, but you have no character. Such a person does not earn any respect. A person who has knowledge, but he has no character, means unethical. It is a social sin. It is a social sin. Then pleasure without conscience. Again, what an important thing. You go after pleasures. Most of this pleasure is momentary. Happiness is permanent, whereas pleasure is momentary. You go for momentary pleasures, but without conscience. That is hurting somebody else. You don't have apply your conscience and you hurt the feelings of someone else and you become very happy or you earn pleasure. That is a social sin. That's a social sin. Next, science without humanity. Science is good for the country. Science is good for the society. Science is good for humanity. But without humanity, if you are only improving the science and scientific knowledge, that is also considered to be a social sin. Then the last these seven sins, many of you may have heard, especially for students and all, it's very important. Gandhiji's 7 social sins are very, very important for anyone who wants to know what is ethics and what is business ethics. Worship without sacrifice. Worship. All of us do worship. All of us want to atone our sins, and we go to the places of worship. We go to church. We go to temple. We go to Gurudwara. We go to mosque. Any place of worship, we go. We do a lot of charity there. You put a lot of money in the hundis. You do a lot of offerings for the God. Everything you do, but you are not if you are not sacrificing, your worship becomes worthless. Your worship is worthless, and it is actually a sin. What type of great principles he has said? Although it is called sins, social sin. That is what I said. Most of these sins, day in and day out, all of us are committing. But we should try to commit only lesser number of sins. We should try to eliminate most of these sins, these 7 sins. So we should be very proud that Mahatma Gandhiji, even in the 19th century, has spoken about business ethics. And business ethics as a science or as a subject became very popular only in the later part of 20th century, by 1980, 85, like that. And in our country and all, it has become a proper principle only very recently. So this Mahatma Gandhiji's 7 social sins is something very, very important. Next slide, please. Indian business model. Yes. Indian business model, again, same thing, mostly based on human values and holism. Human values and holism. What is human values? Human values can be ethical, human values can be spiritual, human values can be moral. These 3 types of values add to our business model. We always believe in having human values. Indian business model, ideal business model. Not that everyone follows that. There may be persons who will be deviating from that. But basically, we believe in human values. And also we have what is called holism. Holism is a sort of unity where we think that soul, mind, and body, they act together. They act in unison, so that there is a principle of holism. And we also believe that our management should center around values, not around wealth, not around wealth. And that is why there is a saying, a person is happy not because what he has, but because what he is. That means if he is a person who believes in values, who believes in holism, who gets rid of the social sins and other things, he will be happy. But if he makes money, if he makes money through unfair means, he will never be happy. A person who has got a lot of unaccounted money, black money or whatever it is, he will be very unhappy. Immediately after demonetization, Many persons have lost their sleeps for days and months and years also, because quite a number of people, their money became worthless after that demonetization. I'm not judging on whether it was good or bad, but I'm only telling that why they were unhappy, because that money was made through unfair means. It was so-called black money or unaccounted money. So when those money became worthless, became only a piece of paper, they became very, very upset. They became very tensed up. Many persons went into depression. So many things happened. So you have to have necessary values in life. Then only your business will prosper. So management centers around values. And next slide. Yeah. So as I told you, business ethics is gaining momentum only very recently. Now our government itself has introduced legislations. It's a very important, one should say, watershed in the history of government and history of business ethics. They have introduced certain legislations. Most important one is the CSR Act, introduced in the Companies Act. As all of you know, companies who are making profit, who have got a turnover above a particular limit, who have made profit above, I think it is 5 crores or something like that, they have to earmark a percentage of their profit for social reforms. CSR Act. So CSR Act has been, there is an amendment in Companies Act where CSR, corporate social responsibility, has been made mandatory. That is, it is compulsory. Earlier also, a number of companies were doing CSR activities without any compulsion. They were doing a lot of charitable activities. But now there is a amendment, there is a mandatory requirement that whenever your profit increases a certain limit, you have to necessarily spend a portion of that for the well-being of the downtrodden section or the marginalized section, where corporate social responsibility aspect comes into picture. So this is one major legislative change brought about in the area of business ethics. Then another one, very important thing, is what is called the Whistleblower Act. Whistleblower Act 2011. After the Information Act has come, and all of us are entitled to get information, Right to Information Act, we can also expose the corrupt practices, the unfair practices that are taking place in an organization into the higher-ups, to the government or to the authorities, without the fear of being caught or being victimized. That is why it is called Whistleblower Act. It was passed in the year 2011, but it has come into full swing only very recently, about 2015. And Whistleblower Act gives you responsibilities to expose those who are doing illegal things within an organization, those who are doing activities of corruption inside an organization, so that the guilty are brought to books. Your exposure, your identity will be protected. This is the Whistleblower Act. And this is again another major step in the right direction for improving the business ethics in our country. And one more thing is what is called Integrity Pact. This Integrity Pact means when big companies enter into contracts, calling for tenders, public sector companies, this Integrity Pact has to be signed. It is a pact, an agreement between the contractor or the tenderer and the major public sector company, where the amount of contract increases a particular value, like 1 crore. If there is a violation, then the tenderer can be taken to task. And for overseeing this, they are appointing, they means the Central Vigilance Commission appoints officers called Independent External Monitor, IEM. Fortunately, I have also been appointed as an IEM, Independent External Monitor, for 3 companies. Cochin Shipyard, as you would have heard about, heard in my biodata, Cochin Shipyard, Visakhapatnam Steel Plant, and FACT Limited. So where there is any doubt about the credentials of the contract, they can always come to the IEM for the opinion, and after hearing both the parties, the issue gets solved instead of going to the court and the proceedings will drag on. This is as per the Integrity Pact has become operational in India only after 2005. And this is as per the suggestions of an international organization called Transparency International. Most of you would have heard Transparency International. What does it mean? To bring in transparency to the whole country, to the whole world. Transparency International is for the whole world. There's an organization which deals with the issues arising on account of corruption all over the world. And they also publish every year what is called CPI. It is not Communist Party of India. It is Corruption Perception Index. Corruption Perception Index. It's a very important concept. There are about 180 countries. And out of the 180 countries, which country is the least corrupt and which country is the most corrupt? There's a statistics, which I will just briefly tell you. Many people, many of those who are hearing this may be knowing, and many of you may be eager to know what is the position of India and how corrupt we are, how honest we are, like that. I will tell you very briefly. Among these 180 countries, the most honest countries, or I should not say use the word most honest, the least corrupt countries, they have got a system where they go and conduct a sort of survey. The Transparency International persons, they conduct a survey, now maybe online, and they talk to a cross-section of the people in the country. And they also gather particulars about how their issues are getting solved by the government officials, whether they have to bribe them, whether they have to see them in other ways, or there are other corrupt practices, whether in cash or kind or any other obligation. All these facts are actually ascertained from people all over the world. And then they have got points, and then finally they analyze. And no country has got 100 out of 100. That is the most gratifying thing, which means that there is corruption in all the countries. Only the extent varies. And the least corrupt country in the world, as of now, as of 2019, is New Zealand. But you should also consider the fact that what is the population of New Zealand? Least populous country, maybe around 1 crore or something, less than 1 crore, if my memory serves me right. The least corrupt countries are New Zealand, again 87%, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Switzerland, Singapore, Norway. These are some of the least corrupt countries, and their points, their score are 87%, 86%, 85%, like that. Now, which are the most corrupt countries in the world? And what are their scores? Most corrupt country in the world is Somalia, 9%. Next is Sudan, all S. Next is Syria, Yemen, all last alphabets. But there is one alphabet country also, Afghanistan. These are the 5. So Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Yemen, and Afghanistan. These are the most corrupt countries. And there also they get some score. It is not 0 out of 100. They get 9, 10, 11, like that. Okay, now come to India. What is our score? We will be anxious to know what is our score. Our score, we get pass mark. We get 41 mark, 41% as per the index of CPI, Corruption Perception Index. And our position is 80 out of 180 countries, which means there are 100 countries behind us, 100 countries which are more corrupt than India. And there are only 79 countries which are less corrupt than India. So we can say that it's not a very bad, pathetic situation as far as corruption is concerned. And our ranking is 80 out of 180, and the percentage is 41%. And you will be anxious to know the next most populous country or the most populous country in the world, China, what is the position? China's position is exactly the same as India. It is 80 and the rank is also 41. So two most populous countries, they are ranked at 80. According to me, it's my personal individual, there is nothing to be ashamed of about this corruption perception index in India, because with 130 crores, we are having this position. Those countries which are ranked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like that, their population is 2 crore, 3 crore, 4 crore, 5 crore like that. So even if percentage wise, we have got a larger amount of honest people or less corrupt people. So this is, and for just for information, some of the other countries on which you will be interested is United States of America, which is a big country. It is 23rd, ranked 23rd. United Kingdom, England, it is ranked 12. Australia is ranked 12. United Arab Emirates is ranked 21. But there is a Gulf country which is ranked below India in CPI, Corruption Perception Index. That is Kuwait, which is ranked at 85. India is ranked at 80. So these are some of the governmental things and some statistics I wanted to tell you, that how we give importance to business ethics and how the government is also trying its level best to improve the ethical standards in the business. Next. Actually, with this introduction, we are going to our actual topic, that is ethics in digital age. So now you know, in the last 10 years, what a revolutionary change has taken place in this country in digital technologies. We are all familiar with words like AI. AI means artificial intelligence. Then smartphones, Internet of Things, deep learning, brain interface. All these things have taken place in the last century or in the last 2 decades, 21st century after 2000 and on. And these have not only got into our skin, it has also gone into our brain, into our head literally, in the sense that you are always looking into this, you are always looking into WhatsApp, you are always looking into Facebook, and of course, brain interface and deep learning, these are technologies which have not probably come into India, and after some time, this will be very common in the country also. So ethics in digital age, why it is important? What is digital age and what is the most important thing in digital technology? The most important thing, as each and every one of you know, in digital technology is the 4-letter word, data, D-A-T-A. 4-letter word only means data, D-A-T-A. Data is said to be gold in digital technology. You know that also. Data is the most important thing, and data can be monetized, data can be misused, data can be sold, data can be subjected to a series of processes, and there can be any number of ethical issues involved in collection of data, data mining, data harvesting, and so many other technical terms are there. So now we have to come forward with a lot of ethical issues. We come forward, we come across a number of ethical issues while dealing with data. And the latest, as you know, today's paper it has come, today's news also was full of that, is about the central government's proposal to create a health ID for all citizens. And for that, they require a number of data, including the religion, the other aspects, so many aspects. I don't want to deal at length with that. There has already been an opposition because these are collecting data unnecessarily, and everybody is scared that this data is likely to be misused. So health ID by the central government. And then of course, as all of us know, Kerala is also full of so many discussions about the data connected with the COVID issue, about the company, how data was supposed to be sold or not. I am not going to the merit of those things, but the discussion is full of data only. Now it has given way to some other discussion, but the basic thing is data is very valuable. Data is equivalent to gold, as far as digital technology is concerned. And the lot of ethical issues are involved in this. The present policies as of now, they are very much inadequate to control the issues involved. As I have put it in the slide, it's a case of too little and too late and too slow. We are actually using the laws framed yesterday for dealing with the situations that are coming up tomorrow. Naturally, there will be a great lag in that. And unless we come forward and try to sort out this through legal framework, there's going to be tremendous issues coming up, not only in India, all over the world. Next slide. Yes. These are the 5 ethical principles for data: privacy, security, and integrity. So privacy of the data collected, it is the most important thing, because data collection is not only a legal issue, but it's an ethical issue also. When you give data to a person, what is your belief? That it will be kept confidential, it will not be misused, and your individuality will not be compromised. Individuality is the most important thing, although many of us may not be thinking in that line. But what happens is, only after your data is monetized by the data collecting agencies, you come to know that whatever you wanted to hide from the society, hide in the sense whatever you wanted to keep as confidential, is now a public policy. So privacy, security, and integrity, this is the most important ethical principle. Unfortunately, it is not sure whether the agencies who are collecting the data are observing this. Then the next one is trust. Promote trust. Promote trust in the sense, when you give your data to an agency, it can be a government agency, it can be a private agency also. There are so many agencies now. Promote trust. There should be trust between the data collector and the data giver. If there is a breach of trust, then who is the sufferer? You are the sufferer. The person who gave data is the sufferer. So you should always try to give data to a person in whom you have trust. Then avoid bias. Bias is something which is very difficult to avoid. Whenever you go for collection, what happens is you will have a bias. You may have a bias against a community. You may have a bias against a gender. You may have a bias against a particular religion, and you may have a bias against a particular race, something like that. So that bias always have to be avoided. Most of you would have heard about what is called, when you have a bias, what happens is, when you collect data, you resort to what is called cherry picking. What is cherry picking? Picking the best. So you collect data of only those persons in whom you are interested. That is called cherry picking. Like, if you take the current situation, there may be a collection of data of COVID patients or persons who have been frequenting these COVID infected areas, something like that. So the data collector, goes there with a bias, saying that the condition here is very good. So there is nothing to panic about the situation here. So he has got a bias in his mind, and he goes and he collects data. If he finds that a person who is having COVID or who has just recovered COVID, he will not go to that house. Instead, he goes to a house where persons who are healthy and who have not been infected with COVID are residing. And then he will be asked to take 100 samples or 100 collected data from 100 persons. But he goes to 100 houses where there is no single instance of COVID, because he has got a bias. So that is what is called cherry picking. This always happens. Whenever sampling takes place, cherry picking has to be avoided. So this ethical principle has to be observed by those who are collecting data. Then accountability. As you know, the most important quality for any profession, including data collection. So data collection, you are accountable. So tomorrow you collect a data, and suppose the data collected is found to be incorrect, then you are accountable for the mistake. And by that you are doing a great disservice to the society. So the organizations have to be accountable for the veracity of the information of the data which has been collected by them. Then the next one is the culture. There should be a proper culture. The culture includes trust, honesty, fairness, etc. And this is to be observed while the data is collected, without which the collected data becomes useless. It becomes a curse rather than a benefit, a boon for the society. Next slide, please. Next. www, yes, everybody knows this. www is World Wide Web. It is the biggest source of information. And here, you also know most of the words like data mining, web mining, data harvesting. Of course, I'm not very familiar with these words, except that I have just noted these things. So web mining, data mining, and data mining is actually, it's also used as a dirty word for selling the privacy of individuals for financial gains. That is data mining or data mining, yes. And it is also called data harvesting if the data are collected through some nefarious designs, through some surreptitious deeds. Data harvesting. So data mining and data harvesting, these are things which are done not in an ethical manner, but in an illegal manner. The most famous or notorious or whatever case of data harvesting is the one of Cambridge Analytica. You must have heard about that. Cambridge Analytica was notorious in the year 2016, just before the US presidential election, where they collected a number of information, data, personal data from the Facebook without making payment to Facebook and all, through some sort of a software. People who are experts in hacking this. And this was one of the reasons why people say that President Trump got elected as the US president. So this is one of the most notorious case of harvesting of personal data, stealing of data mining through unfair means. So this is a very important point which every person who deals with the data has to understand. And your personality, your personal matters, your privacy is very important for you. It has got a direct bearing to your individuality. If your privacy is lost, your individuality is also lost. And this is more so in Western society. As far as we are concerned, we are not so much unduly worried about these things. But in Western countries, these are considered to be very, very important. And in your loss of your data to the society or to the persons who are misusing or making use of that may be an advantage to the society. They can help in deriving better market strategies, to improve the efficiency of search engines and so many other things based on the data that they have collected. But as far as the individual is concerned, it is a clear loss for him, provided he has not given his consent. But now there are cases where individuals are giving consent and they are selling data almost for monetary gain. Just like there is now human organs are sold. There are many people also, it is highly unethical that anyone should sell his kidney or anyone should sell a portion of his organ. It is highly unethical, illegal also. It is not only unethical, it is illegal. But still it takes place. There are people who are selling their kidneys. Similarly, now a stage has reached when many people, they are willing to offer their data about their personal matters to organizations, private organizations, and even some government organizations. So things are progressing in a not very desirable manner. So loss of privacy is one of the most important aspects of ethical issues of data mining, data collection. The next is misinterpretation of mined information. Mined information is not M-I-N-D, mined. The information which has been processed. Sometimes what happens, deliberately, the information which has been gathered and which has been processed, they are misinterpreted. If take for example COVID, a lot of information are being collected by various agencies, mostly health agencies. If they want, they can interpret the information in such a way that our state or our country, if you take the whole of India, India is doing well in the treatment of COVID. Our recovery rate is very high. It can be interpreted like that. It can also be interpreted as if our situation is very bad. It depends on the agency which are doing the interpretation. So there is always an issue involving misinterpretation of the mind data. Misinterpretation is actually taking place unless we have got concrete rules and legislations to deal with these things. But of course, these are very difficult issues to be tackled with. Then the third is anonymizing data. Again, an issue which is not given proper attention to. Your data has always to be anonymized or pseudonymized. If you give a data, if Vijay Kumar, I give a data, I am aged so and so, I have got this many health issues, my weight is this, my BP is this, all these things I tell. And also my other credentials, I have worked in the government, all these things I am giving. And if somebody gives this data, a person who knows me will definitely feel, oh, this data relates to such and such person. Oh, he is having this problem. Oh, he is having that problem. Actually, such data have to be anonymized. Either way, either you remove the name, it has to be made anonymous, or at least it has to be pseudonymized. Instead of Vijay Kumar, they give a name as Rafael, or they give a name as Muhammad. And then immediately they will know, oh, it is not Muhammad, it is not of Vijay Kumar. But still, an intelligent person can find out if the certain issues are tallying, certain parameters are tallying. So anonymization of data is also another ethical issue. Then there is what is called the indirect issues. Lot of indirect issues, like as I already mentioned, your data will be stolen. Your data will be stolen. The data collected by one particular agency, it will be stolen by another agency, and it will be made a public document, and many persons will be having access to such information. A person working in a bank, he may have access to the depositors, their details. He leaves that bank, he takes away that, and he gives it to somebody else, maybe for monetary consideration or to further the business interest of that organization. That is how most of us get calls from different banks, different NBFCs and different organizations, and they even quote your name. And many of us get, including our Gunawardhan sir has got a call from Provident Fund organization in the guise of Provident Fund organization, saying that you are having a Provident Fund account and we are interested to give you the money provided you pay some portion, something like that. Similarly, from insurance companies also, you get some telephone calls saying that one of your insurance policies has lapsed and the maturity value is this much. If you pay the last installment, you will get. How do they get these information? Our telephone number, our even our biodata also they get. This is on account of the unethical issues involved in dealing with data. There are quite a number of persons who will be selling this data. But is it possible to prevent this? It is very, very difficult. It is almost next to impossible, at least as of now, as per the present legislations. Yes. Okay, now privacy enhancing technology. What is this? They are thinking in terms of privacy enhancing technology, PET. And what is privacy? It is a very fragile term. What is privacy, which I interpret as privacy, need not necessarily be privacy in the eyes of Mr. Soni or Mr. Gunawardhan, may be different. So privacy is very fragile. Nobody can clearly say what is this, and it's fragile also. It gets broken. And you may think that, yes, I am a private individual. My data cannot be collected by anyone. But the moment the state thinks, now recently again, there was a controversy about collecting of call data with reference to COVID. So there was a big hue and cry against that. The matter went up to High Court. Why? Because it is affecting the privacy of the individual. That was the stand taken by the persons who took up the matter in the court. So privacy is something which nobody wants to get compromised. But unfortunately, it gets compromised without your knowledge also. Typing of telephones. Your phone can be tapped by certain agencies by observing certain rules and regulations. But unfortunately, very often, without observing these rules and regulations also, your telephone can get tapped, no doubt about that. But it is again unethical, it is illegal. It is not only unethical, it is illegal also. So the point is, privacy is something to what extent we can protect is a decision of the state government. If the state, in the sense, I'm not telling about state government, Kerala state, it is a decision of the state, that is the government, the ruling authority. If they feel that your privacy is of no value to us when we take the larger interest of the country, of the nation, then your privacy has no value. Whatever information you have, it will all be taken away. What you consider private is no longer private, it will be a public document. So privacy is, to what extent privacy can be protected is the decision of a state, decision of the nation. And if they want, they can call for any details, and the details are no longer private. Next. Next slide, Sony. Yes, the last slide I'm saying is just the society is at a crossroad, an engineering design versus values, and a value design versus the technical analysis. So what is going to happen tomorrow, nobody can predict. Only thing is, more and more ethical issues are likely to crop up, and to what extent these issues will affect the data collection and proper dissemination of the data for the welfare of the society, it depends on many factors. No one can foresee a highly ethical design in data collection, because the very nature of data collection, and because huge money is involved in data and in digital technology, it is going to be a tough thing to have a proper legislation for ethical decisions in data mining. With this, I would like to conclude and can have a sort of discussion or questions or whatever it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay Kumar sir. It was an electrifying session, going through the ancient scripts, then to Mahatma Gandhi, then to the new digital age. And we have questions from participants. We'll take some of the questions from the participants. Those who want to ask the question directly, please unmute yourself and you can ask the question.
Sir,
Yes.
can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah. See, regarding this monetization of data, there is a lot of hue and cry. For example, when this Aadhaar was to be linked with PAN card, lot of hue and cry is created. I don't understand why should it be there. Because by giving our essential data, we are not giving 100% information about us when they are asking the Aadhaar. So limited case data is a must for the government to ensure that the income tax evasion is avoided. So why should that not be taken as an essential thing and implemented?
See, I fully agree with you that income tax, PAN number and Aadhaar has to be linked. But it is not the intention of all persons in our country that they should pay taxes correctly. In a country of 130 crore population, only 5% are taxpayers. Doesn't mean that the remaining 95% do not have taxable income. For various reasons, they are not paying. And they do not want to disclose their details to government department. That is why such a hue and cry was there when there was a decision to link Aadhaar with PAN card. But the government also, I think, has not made it compulsory. They are still trying, because some people have gone to the court and they got some stay like that. Now there's a big hue and cry to link Aadhaar with our voters ID, so that there will not be any duplicate. Yes. That is what one should do.
We should do it, exactly. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
One question from Teddy Abraham, our member from Hyderabad. Give some light on ethical hacking. Nowadays, hacking is taking place, but some of them are saying it is ethical. What is your view on that, sir? Ethical hacking.
The hacking itself, by its word, is I don't think it is ethical. But you can say some hackings can be ethical if it is done for the benefit of the society. If hacking, which will ultimately result in a benefit to the society at large, you can say it is an ethical hacking. But hacking per se should not be encouraged or promoted, according to me.
We'll take 2 more questions. You can either raise a hand or unmute yourself and ask the question, please. Yeah, before winding up the session, we have regularly publishing our management voice, and next volume of the management voice ready to release. May I request our chief guest Vijay Kumar sir kindly release our management voice issue.
Yeah, I'm happy to release the latest issue of Management Voice, and I invite Mr. Ranjan Sridharan, our editor, to do the same.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Thank you, President. So our magazine is actually coming back after a long COVID break. And in a way, this is also the COVID issue, because if you go through the contents, most of the articles contributed by our members and our stalwarts deal with COVID and its impact and its impact on the economy, the stock market, etc. So, another very apt and fitting thing about this issue, which has been released by Mr. Vijay Kumar, is that the interview column features Mr. Vijay Kumar himself. You know, he has been interviewed by Mr. Raghu Raman, and they talk about taxes and things like that. So you must really read that. The other important articles, like our regular article policy column, Mr. V.P. Nandakumar, emphasizes the need to strike a balance between measures to contain the disease with measures to support economic activity that will preserve livelihoods. Our past president, CA Dr. V. Venugopal, has contributed an article on the impact of the pandemic on the Indian economy. And TMA's past president, CA Mr. T.S. Anantharaman, has also kind of looked at how COVID-19 has impacted the stock markets and what it holds for the stock markets in future. You know, his article is "Stock Markets and Corona Grip: A Peep into the Future." So these are some of the articles. We have our usual columns, and I'm sure it will make for interesting reading. I hope you will all get the printed copies very soon now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjan. Any more questions on the topic?
In the chat, I believe.
Yes, okay. A few questions in the chat box.
Can we say that digitalization has strengthened our system?
Digitalization has?
Yes.
Can we say that digitalization has strengthened our system?
Definitely. Just strengthened our system. No doubt about that. There may be some issues, but definitely it has strengthened our system. All systems.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions? Good over there, sir.
He has muted his phone.
Yeah.
Audio is muted.
Yeah, he mentioned a tough subject explained with a great ease and understanding, which can only be accomplished by a person of great acumen. It is Mr. Vijay Kumar. Congratulations. Actually, you went through the subject from the ancient era to the modern era. It's very much accepted by all our audience. A lot of appreciation in the chat box. And now I request CAP.
Where is the chat box? How can I see the chat box?
Yeah, the bottom side of your screen, you can see chat box, chat, Alt touch, or you put Alt plus H.
Immediately after participants, Sony. Chat is there.
Chat is there.
Air content.
In the bottom line of the bottom side of the Zoom, you can see mute, both video, participants, and there is a tab for chat. Before share.
Anyway, it's okay.
Yeah, I will share this chat to you. Yeah, I will share with you. May I request PJ Shaji, anything to be added?
Okay. I think it was a very, very wonderful, very informative class. You are actually a treasure house. The students are. You took all the subjects, as Sony said, from the ancient times to the digital era, touching upon all the practical issues from your own experience as ombudsman and income tax commissioner. All this were benefited by the students as well.
Thank you.
And of course, our TMA members are there. So many of them are there. All are benefited by your speech. When I started the webinar, I thought it was a very small subject, but you took it up in a very nice manner and made it such a vast, elaborate subject and made it very practical and very informative. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There are so many students also. They are really benefited. Happy Onam to one and all. And now I invite CA Manoj, our treasurer, for the formal vote of thanks. Mr. Manoj?
Yeah, thank you, Shaji. It's indeed a proud moment for me to propose vote of thanks for a wonderful webinar conducted on ethics on digital age, conducted by the student chapters of Digital Management Association. I would like to thank Mr. P.K. Vijaykumar IRS, retired Director, Dhanlaxmi Bank, and former Director General of Investigation, Insurance Ombudsman for Kerala and Lakshadweep. When we thought about a subject like this on ethics, the first thought about the subject, we went to you, sir. In today's life, one name which immediately came to mind is that of Vijaykumar, sir. This talk was really inspiring, and your message on ethical living was really motivational. Thank you, Vijaykumar, sir, for sparing such a valuable time for the students chapter as well as for our members. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank the dynamic president of TMA. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank the dynamic president of TMA, Sony CL, who is amazing us daily with his work ethics and impeccable planning. Thank you, Sony. I would like to thank Shaji PJ, coordinator of student chapter activities, for organizing such a program in a brilliant manner to all the benefits of all the students as well as the members. Above all, I would like to thank all the MC Managing Committee members, members of PMA, members of Student Chapter, and all other invited guests for attending the webinar. I'm sure all of you must have been encouraged by Vijaykumar sir's today's webinar. Thank you all and wishing you all a very happy honor.
Thank you, Manoj.
Yeah.
Thank you, Manoj. Today, this program attended participants are from different states. From Allahabad Management Association, Mr. A.P. Goyal attended. I mark his presence today. Then Teddy Abraham was from Hyderabad. And many from Manipal Academy also participated in this program. Thank you everyone for sparing your precious time with the TMA. Once again, wish all of you greetings of honor. Thank you. Thank you very much. With this, we come to end of this webinar. Thank you, Vijaykumar sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Onam to all.
Happy
Yeah.
Onam.
Happy
Happy
Yeah,
Onam.
happy Onam to all. Yeah, happy Onam to all. Thank you.